Now, Robert Mugabe has resigned as Zimbabwe's president. The 93-year-old leader, who has led the country for nearly 4 decades, has given up the reins shortly after Zimbabwe's parliament began an impeachment process against him.
Subsection 1 of the Constitution of Zimbabwe. Yours faithfully, Robert Mugabe, President of the Republic of Zimbabwe.
Now, in a letter read out in Parliament by the Speaker of the House, President Mugabe said it was his decision to step down voluntarily. Mugabe has been facing pressure for days following a military takeover. Zimbabweans flooded the streets of Harare in celebration of his resignation. Now, Mugabe was until now the world's oldest leader. He had previously refused to resign despite last week's military takeover and days of protests. Now let's get the latest details now from Farai Mwakutuya. He joins us in Harare. Farai, welcome to the show. Now, what do we know so far about this? We're seeing a lot of celebration and euphoria in Zimbabwe. What's happening? Give us the update, Farai.
Uche, there is so much excitement here, so much celebration on the streets. People are honking their horns. People are shouting, they are screaming, some are singing. It's a melting pot of emotion here. I think there's a sense of relief on one hand, there's a sense of excitement on the other. But I think what is overwhelmingly apparent here is that there's a renewed sense of hope. Many people are calling this a new Independence Day. Some people saying let's declare it a public holiday. So that is, it's difficult to capture in such few words the emotions that people are going through here. But I can tell you it's a historic day for Zimbabweans, many of them now looking forward to the future with hope and optimism going forward, Uche.
Now, Farai, in terms of the economy, what's next for the country? How will we see Mugabe's exit impacting sentiment in Zimbabwe?
Well, I think it will have a positive sentiment. I think the first thing is just the fact that President Robert Mugabe is no longer there. He has been for very long, an impediment to investment into this country. There are some corporates, some potential investors who have said that they will hold back the investment because their problem may not necessarily be the fundamentals in Zimbabwe, but they had a problem with the person of Robert Mugabe. Now that is gone, we expect that sentiment to change. We also expect that some of the policies that have been implemented under President Robert Mugabe may be repealed or perhaps even revised. I'm talking here about indigenization. We're looking at things that will attract investment into the country. So the expectation here is that now that he is gone, now that there's a new dispensation, people will look at that, perhaps not immediately bring in their money. We don't expect this to happen overnight, but I think there's now, an openness to come to look at Zimbabwe as an investment option again. We know that there are many people who have wanted to invest here, who've been holding back, waiting perhaps for a change of leadership, which has come now, so that interest will be renewed, and perhaps the interest will be followed by the dollars, the investment dollars, which Zimbabwe desperately needs.
And Farai, of course, this depends on what happens on the political front next. So what can we expect? Is Mnangagwa taking over as leader of the country now? Are you expecting elections anytime soon?
Well, elections are due next year in 2018. By 31st of July, Zimbabwe must have had its elections. Now, what the Constitution says is when a president steps down or resigns, in this particular case, the government, the last acting vice president should take his place and is allowed to complete that term. So we don't need to go to fresh elections. Even if he had resigned 2 years ago, whoever took over would finish the entire term. The 2 years that were remaining. So in this case, Emmerson Mnangagwa, who has been nominated by the ruling party, will then take over this term and complete it, see it out to its completion, which is next year when elections will be held in this country. So that is what we expect to happen. Former Vice President Emmerson Mnangagwa was not in the country. He left when he was fired, and we expect him back overnight to now come back and take the reins of this ship. In his absence, what cabinet will do is will, look for the most senior or highest ranking cabinet minister who will run the country in the interim until that process of, reinstating Vice President Emmerson Mnangagwa, former Vice President Emmerson Mnangagwa, is completed.
Well, quite an exciting day. Many thanks for that update, Farai. Farai Mwakutuya joining us there in Harare.